A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I urge all of you to remain in your seats. We're going to have an exciting session looking at the profit pivot, where investors see value. That is the focus of this next session. And I am pleased to welcome my distinguished panelists on stage. Please give a warm welcome to Farah Foustok, founding partner and strategic advisor at ALARA Partners. Go on. And Mohamed, Fairooz, Middle East lead at SC Ventures. A warm welcome, please. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Just based on our discussion backstage, I know this is going to be a fascinating conversation. And something so important for fintechs to understand, that investor perspective. Mohamed, I want to start with you and get to the heart of the issue. What does investable look like today in the fintech context?
First of all, it's a pleasure being here with you today, and allow me also to take this opportunity to thank the organizers. It's another brilliant Fintech Forward event. I think this year it's been taken to another level, so well done to the organizers. Maybe let me just shed the light about how we at SC Venture look at investment and how we look at the whole venture ecosystem. We've started our journey in 2018, focusing on Asia. The journey started by accelerating innovation for Standard Chartered Bank and for the entire banking sector. Our thesis is to rewire the DNA of banking. Right. And what do we mean by rewire the DNA of banking? As a bank, as an international bank with presence in many countries, we've been, of course, focusing on innovation. Innovation is always not meeting the expectations of our clients, and that's why we've created a separate entity called SC Ventures with the primary focus of continuing in parallel deriving innovation outside of the bank. In parallel to that, we've also established an investment fund. The investment is to focus on technology service providers, partners, and strategic kind of partnerships where we combine efforts and we look at partnerships, and of course we deliver something even better and bigger. Focusing on this part of the world, I think we have a great opportunity at this time to support the fintech ecosystem, to support the venture building ecosystem. We are focusing on digital assets as an example. So we've established in the region a $100 million fund, digital assets focused fund in partnership with one of our strategic partners in Japan. And this is only one example where we see the Middle East, we see the GCC in particular as a golden source for investment. Other different themes, which we will elaborate more during the panel on as well, is something to do with digitizing wealth management products, digitizing the SME segment, so on and so forth.
Absolutely, and I'm keen to dig into some of the segments within fintech that you think are most attractive. But Farah, I'd love to get your perspective as well on how that investor mindset is shifting. Do you agree with what I said, that it's the focus on profit now and a move away from growth at all costs?
So maybe if you asked me 20 years ago, 30 years ago, so I come from traditional finance. Right. So I built 3 asset management businesses in the Middle East in the last 20 years. So built and ran them for local entities and international. And clearly there is a lot of legacy infrastructure, legacy ways of doing things, legacy mindset, which needs to evolve, which is not evolving as fast as it should.
And never does.
So you'd like to think that there is a way to shift and do things differently. We're not there yet. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's so much more to do. I think you talk about Standard Chartered, clearly legacy infrastructure, trying to do things differently, creating a new way. But the people that sit in the organization are still the same people. Yeah. So to me, one of the issues that needs to evolve is mindset.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And again, the focus of our discussion today. But Mohamed, can you elaborate a little bit more on how you're defining success today with your investments. How do you measure that success beyond valuation?
Working previously with the bank, of course, there are KPIs and there are kind of other, systematic way of looking at success. But for us, the way how we look at success is by referring to a few factors, and allow me to share this as well with the audience. Today, success means the impact into the market we operate. What's the role SC Venture plays in the Middle East, and what role we play in the overall vision of the economic vision of the country. That's something which is extremely key for us. The second factor is we always prefer to work with our partners, to work with the public and private sector to make the impact even bigger. We would rather gain a 5%, a 10%, a 50% on an investment, but come up with something massive, something significant, and share the return on investment with some of the partners. That for us is a success, because the impact is on a bigger scale, the impact is on more users, and that would derive even more sustainable and more growth for us. We also invest in talent. So for us, the whole story of SC Ventures started by changing the perception and changing the mindsets of employees of a bank to entrepreneurs. How can I today promote and support and accelerate colleagues who are working with Standard Chartered Bank to make them more independent, to build up their more independent opportunities? And we identified problem statements at the beginning of 2018. And today, these problem statements, led by some of the ex-colleagues who used to work with the bank, they are like large organizations and large entities. So for us, it's not about the return, it's not about the KPI, it's the impact, it's the sustainability of the growth, and how can we invest in our talent on a long-term basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to circle back to the point you made about impact at a national level and how you achieve that. We talked a little bit earlier about maybe being a bit more organized with those flows. A little controversial, but maybe we'll come back to that later in the discussion. But as we're talking about value and success, Farah, can you comment a little bit more on how founders at fintech firms can better communicate that value to investors?
Fintech emerged during the global financial crisis. There was a crisis, there were issues, and that disruption meant the banking system needed to be unbundled. So we went from banks to phones, where the consumer then has control to a certain extent. So the tech mindset, people that came out of asset management, the traders, the technology people, the mathematicians, the scientists, are not always the most eloquent people to sit in front of an investor and explain the story, communicate and create that emotional connection as to what are they trying to solve and who are they solving it for. Because you talk about problems, and one of the first things I did when I left Lazard was go to California and study design thinking, to unlearn everything I've learned and relearn a new way of designing and identifying problems, because many cases we're trained to identify a problem and solve it. But who says the problem we identify is the problem we should be solving? And are we sitting and spending enough time in the problem, seeing the problem from all different perspectives, to then identify what problem we should be solving and for who? And so when you talk about mutual value creation, I think it's imperative, because if we do have meaning, if there is a purpose, if we are evolving to profit, it can't be profit at the cost of impact and purpose, because our societies would not evolve. We live in a world today where there is complete disconnection. We think we're connected because we're online. We're completely disconnected. We don't know whether the person across the screen, what they feel, what environment they're sitting in, what is the context. And so we are disconnected from nature. We're disconnected from each other. We're disconnected between our heart and our mind. We're disconnected in so many ways. So this fragmentation means that even founders sit and solve problems in boxes. We need to look across the ecosystem, because every single thing is connected.
Yeah, and become better storytellers then.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, Farah, as a result of all of this shift, we set the scene for this conversation, talking about this mindset shift with investors. As a result, how have capital flows changed in 2025? Are there certain business models that have become more attractive?
Well, clearly capital is going to AI. Everybody's seen those massive shifts to AI. If you mention the word AI, you receive capital. And then nobody talks about how AI is being powered, energy transition. You can't have the AI revolution without the energy transition. And is it new energy? Is it old energy? How is that happening? And I think we go back to the individuals that show up, that sit at the table to tell the story. What problem are they solving? Are they able to solve it? Are they able to create a sustainable business model? And I don't really like the word sustainable, because sustainable means you keep things in the current state, which is not sustainable. So it needs to be regenerative. It needs to be circular economy. We need to move away actually from sustainability. We need to move to new ways of doing things that are more inclusive, where there is mutual value creation. And it's all about the individuals. It's about the people that show up. Are the women receiving the funding they should be receiving? Not necessarily. We spoke before about too much capital going internationally versus locally. We have 65% of the population below the age of 30. So we have youth that is bursting with innovation. Do they have the right infrastructure, the right ecosystem, the right people around them to guide them? Is it old school thinking that is guiding new skill thinking to create? Is it old frameworks, or is it new frameworks? Is it our narrative that is wrong? Are we using the wrong words? And should we even be using Islamic Sharia or ethical? So we've touched on so much.
We have, and I do want to come back to the Islamic finance point as well when we're talking about fintech here in the region. But Mohamed, what are your thoughts on cross-border investment? How has that changed for fintech in 2025? And which markets are emerging as big fintech hubs now?
So obviously, Middle East indeed is becoming more and more a very engaging, a very kind of future-looking market. We took a decision early 2024 to focus on the Middle East. We've expanded into the region here. Our attendance today in this market, Bahrain being a forward-looking market, is another a very interesting, very kind of optimistic market for us. I think speaking about themes such as digital assets, such as AI, such as digitized wealth management tech, et cetera, I think this is the place where we need to be. The stability in the market, the human capital here, the stability of the regulatory infrastructure, and the connectivity between the public sector, the private sector. These are very key components of any success. The ecosystem in the Middle East is very robust. It's very well connected. And I think more and more robustness, more and more connectivity would help investors, would help cross-border investment, would increase the FDIs into this market. I mean, look at the statistics, look at the amount of startups, look at the amount of population moving from elsewhere, east and west, into this region, is a testimony of how solid is this market, how sustainable is this market. I think future is very bright, and it's no longer a local market. It's even beyond regional market. It's becoming a global hub for many organizations.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's the perfect segue into this next segment of the discussion, I want to turn to the region and deep dive into that a little bit more. Farah, when we've had the prep for this session, you said something interesting. You said, if regulation allows innovation to flourish, what is your view of the regulatory frameworks here in the Middle East? What's working, but more importantly, what's not working?
So I think you've seen how regulation has helped or acted as an impediment to innovation globally. The United States was very pro-innovation and supported that flourishing ecosystem. Then you came to Europe, UK, that were more stringent, which in some cases prevented innovation. And you're actually seeing a lot of those startups coming to the region because they have proof of concept in UK or Europe, but the regulator is preventing them from expanding or scaling. And so they're actually moving to the region. I'm speaking to one or two. One is going to Saudi Arabia, one is coming to the UAE. And so the regulatory framework here, which I think was touched on in a couple of the sessions, is extremely inclusive. Mm-hmm. It's very accommodating. You have the sandboxes. One of I think the best things that the Middle East does is engagement at every level, whether it's with business owners, innovators, investors. There's this constant engagement and bringing people together to say what is working and what is not working. How do we fix this? And one of the visionaries behind this was Sheikh Mohamed, who used to walk around Dubai 20, 30 years ago and sit on the table and say what's working, what's not working. The same thing happens in all these regions. I think senior leadership is very accessible, whether it's royal, whether it's ministers. There's not many places in the world where you have business people so easily accessing the most senior leaders to sit down and say, this is working, this is not working, we need help. But one of the things that probably doesn't work is the coordination, which I think you've touched on, is the coordination amongst these regions. Nobody comes to the Middle East to build a business to service one country. They're all too small. And so you can't sit in Dubai and only service Dubai or UAE. You can't sit in Saudi. You have to service the region and beyond. There are huge populations around us, whether it's in Africa, India. And so how can regulators work together? I saw this on the public market side. We see now in the private side. There needs to be much more coordination, collaboration across the region to allow the flow of capital, the flow of innovation, ideas, the scaling of business.
Absolutely. And I think that's been a sticking point for this market for so many years. Too small, too small. I know that fintechs here have a global ambition and can tap into that global consumer base. But you made a good point earlier. Proof of concept is in this market. So it's a small. But do you think that, I want to follow up on that. Do you think that's feasible when you do have healthy competition between these countries? Is it feasible to harmonize and then allow fintechs to scale in the region?
I don't know who's in the audience, but
I'm asking tough questions.
I mean, you've seen the different models that have emerged. The UAE's pull of international firms to set up presence in the region. Then the Saudi pull to headquarters have to be in Saudi Arabia. Small businesses can't do this. Bigger businesses might be able to do this. How many offices can you have in the region? Now, more recently, you're seeing Kuwait also asking internationals to open offices. You're also seeing a new model emerging in Abu Dhabi, where you have new JVs being formed. So Mubadala, as head of private equity, has now spun out and they've set up a new entity that is co-funded by Kane, Eldridge, and Mubadala to set up a new entity that invests in the region and outside the region in real estate. So actually this means that the local sovereign owns the economics, which I think is the new model. No longer do internationals just need to set up an office to have a rep office to continue to extract capital, by the way, outside, not investing in the region. I think this needs to change to say, how do the regional sovereigns, allocators of capital, create entities here co-funded by the internationals, put skin in the game, but where economics is shared. No longer is it the local capital just paying fees and creating value in the region.
Yeah. Mohamed, what are your thoughts on this? I think we've circled back to your point on regulator or even government coordination in terms of where the funds flow, but love your thoughts on this.
So it's a very key component of any investment decision. I would connect this question to your previous question. It's one of the parameters an investor and an international investor would assess before entering any market. So it's one of the most material components of an investment decision. That's point number one. Secondly, I think generally speaking, you have two types of regulators. You have proactive or reactive, right? As an investor, what we would like to avoid is the reactive, because it delays investment decision. It creates an inflated cost. It creates a back and forth. And this is what we actually don't see here in this part of the world. It's a very proactive regulatory landscape. I would focus on Bahrain as an example. The regulators here and the central bank, they are very forward-looking. They're very proactive regulators. Giving you some facts and examples. Today, if you speak about the digital asset framework, one of the most advanced frameworks, not just within the region, but globally. And many other examples. And the Fintech unit has been set up many years back, focusing on Fintech, advancing and ensuring that staying close with close engagement, close communication is something which is a strength in this part of the world. Now, as a result, what does it lead? It leads to a more confidence by investors. It leads to a more productive fintech ecosystem, and it leads to a kind of a bridge between what investors expect and what the end user receives. Having said that, I think is there an area where we can improve? Definitely, yes. Improvement is a cycle, and it's an evolving matter. What we can do more is to find a way where we can bridge or come up with a passporting model between regulators globally. And the reason why I highlight that, because for us as SC Ventures, where we have presence in Hong Kong and Singapore and the UAE and London, having that kind of connectivity or a passporting model would make our investments even more easier and more visible.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Can Standard Chartered drive regulation for the innovation?
So we usually support regulators globally. We are part of the core college regulators. So there is a group of regulators, including the Hong Kong regulator, the UK regulator, the DFSA regulators, where they meet on very regular basis. Standard Chartered plays a very key role. I mean, we're lucky enough to be part of these discussions. We're lucky enough to have presence globally. And for us, I think these kind of engagement and communication would make our life easier in terms of moving and transferring and cross-border investment and other stuff.
Sure, and I think that's a perfect example of that private-public collaboration we've been talking about all morning. So exciting to see that system up and running and effective as well. Mohamed, I wanted to ask you about Islamic finance and fintech. What is the opportunity here in the region for that versus, say, in Asia, in large Islamic finance markets like Indonesia?
First of all, I like, Farah, your terminology. You called it ethical, instead of Islamic. So overall, in a nutshell, we see it as a gap and an opportunity. I think in the region, we have a huge opportunity of ethical or Islamic banking or Islamic fintech investment. Is there enough funding? Is there enough kind of investment focusing on that kind of segment? We believe no. And in fact, although it's something which is very early, but something which we as SC Venture, we are looking at and discussing with few of our strategic partners, is to kind of establish an Islamic focused growth fund, which would be dedicated to invest in Islamic fintechs in the region. There are many examples in the region where they focus on Islamic digital banks, they focus on cross-border payments, wallets, even digital assets. I think we need to pay more attention, because that's a niche which should be led from this part of the world to other countries.
Fantastic. So for those in Islamic fintech, you know who to go to. We have a few minutes left, and I want to wrap up with a question to both of you about looking ahead, like tap into your crystal ball, looking at 2026. Where do you see the most opportunity? What are you excited about the most for the next year? Farah, I'll start with you.
For me, and we're talking about regional innovation.
Or regional and global, but or both. Be great to
globally. I'm not excited about a lot of things. I am excited about our youth. My children are 23 and 21. My son works in M&A advisory, and he's already building a paddle tennis chain in Malaysia. So I'm excited that our children, I hope, are learning not what we've taught them, but building toolboxes for the future, building the ability to be resilient, courageous, push the system, break the system. There are a lot of things that don't work. And I think people need to have the curiosity to ask why. So this region is extremely exciting to me because we have so much youth. I'm very excited by the amount of women that step up into senior leadership and come through the pipeline, because I think that I could not have built my career anywhere else but in the Middle East. And I always say that women are more respected and have more opportunity in this part of the world than anywhere else in the world, regardless of what the world thinks. So for me, I think as long as youth are growing with the right toolboxes and surrounded by the right people, I'm very excited that this part of the world has the foundations, the leadership, the ability to disrupt, because every time there is a problem in the rest of the world, this region is able to pivot as an entrepreneurial region and identify the opportunity and be very, very strategic in building for the future. So I'm very proud and humbled to be 100% Arab, sitting in the region, being part of the story.
Fantastic. Mohamed.
So a few themes which we recognize as growth themes or growth segments. First of all, we believe that digital asset is here to stay. I'm not here to project whether Bitcoin will go up or down, but our role is to create infrastructure, and these infrastructure are regulated, well governed, and compliant with the laws and regulation, including custody, exchange, tokenization, issuance, and other stuff. So digital asset is definitely a core strength which we will focus on and will continue focusing on. We believe that wealth management is something which is increasing as as a focus area for SC Ventures. In fact, it's also a risk. We've seen many players in the market who end up being into fraud, manipulating the market, and this is something which we need to raise as a red flag. If we don't identify the right infrastructure, the right a governance around this wealth tech, I think it's a longer term issue to solve, and this is something which we are building for the region to make wealth easier for the mass retail market. The third theme which we focus on is SMEs. I mentioned at the beginning that whatever we do plays a role within the national economic agenda. SME is a core part of the national agenda for any country, including the Kingdom of Bahrain. We would love to support SMEs, not just to get the right financing, but to support them growing by digitizing the entire journey. We'll provide financing, we'll provide logistics services, we'll provide other value-added services, all smoothly on a very digital kind of tech platform.
Very exciting focus area, certainly. But thank you so much. We've come to the end of our discussion. Please join me in thanking Farah and Mohamed.